So our opening session this morning, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be exploring the links between AI and business value. So delivering business value is the ultimate goal to be a market leader, but how do you shape business strategy using emerging trends and market challenges to deliver results? This is what we're going to be discussing, exploring case studies on emerging AI trends to add value to the business, driving loyalty, revenue, and brand reputation. So I'd like to welcome to the stage now our first panel discussion, Shadi El Murad, Leo Burnett. So Shadi has got over 25 years experience creating innovative 360 digital social products and solutions for executing effective strategies. His main drive is maximising business development and marketing opportunities for clients. And as a business lead, he's tasked with developing a strong understanding of the client business interface to identify and align any possible opportunities to create conversations that lead to conversions across multiple social media platforms. And joining Shadi for this conversation, could we please welcome Jiedra Malinovskate, Chief Strategy Officer, CNTXT, which is a joint venture between Saudi Aramco and Cognite, and it's a leading digital transformation company in the kingdom, advancing public and private sectors through use of innovative cloud, data management, and AI technologies. So Jiedra is responsible for developing CNTXT's corporate strategy, managing strategic planning, and building partnerships and alliances. And then we have Harvey Bennett, Business Director, One Energy Spark Foundry. Thank you, Harvey. Harvey's a Marketing Strategy Director with hands-on experience developing machine intelligence solutions and bringing them to the markets, and an entrepreneurial mindset and a passion for finding problems. He's leading on Aramco's media with a personal objective of reshaping the global narrative of this industrial powerhouse. So this is going to be a really, really interesting conversation to kickstart the sessions this morning. I would like to welcome our moderator, Melis, who's already on this. Melis is so used to coming up and down the stage. She's here already. So ladies and gentlemen, let's have a round of applause, please, for our first panel this morning. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so thank you very much, first of all, joining us. I mean, we all talk about AI. AI is the new hype. But really, I mean, what's driving AI to success? How actually companies use it? How business results are driven or bettered by AI? So today we're going to discuss about that. And I'm going to start with a very easy question to you, Harvey. What do you see as the emerging trends actually on AI, especially in different industries?
Thank you very much. You might want to turn off the microphone, there's feedback. Good question. I think, firstly, hello everybody. It's wonderful to see so many bright faces in the audience. In terms of answering the question, I think there's a worrying emerging trend, as far as I see it at the moment, which is the sort of centralization of these large language models. So really, whereas previously we were looking at a very democratized and sort of open sourced environment, we're now looking at these really big companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, who are all now positioning themselves to sort of dominate the market, which for me, I find concerning. I think it's a trend that we all should be looking at and mindful of. There are some players that are looking to change that. There's one called Littlebox. They're really about sort of decentralizing artificial intelligence and making it so you can run it for yourself. You could have like your own AI in your home that is custom to you. It all operates locally. It doesn't upload anything to the cloud. So this is an area for me which, while it might not necessarily be entirely the answer that we're looking for from a business perspective and the maximizing business value, which for me is really about maximizing customer value, a company like Littlebox really is an interesting one. This sort of decentralized, de-governed AI opportunity is really interesting.
Okay, so if I may turn to Jiedra and Shadi, so what do you have to add to that?
I think just to add, generative AI is definitely a hype now. I think as with any trend, we vastly overestimate impact in short term and underestimate in the long term. And as with any hype technology, and I think we've been through a couple of these cycles with metaverse and blockchain and whatnot, the prerequisites to use it and get value out of it needs to be in place. And that applies also for generative AI. It's not a silver bullet, and it's not a solution to all of your problems. And in order to really get value out of it long term, you need to have the right foundation. Then it comes to the data, then it comes to the organization, then it comes to governance around it.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much to add. Firstly, hello to everyone. Thank you, MMA. Thank you, Mills, for having us today. For me, some of the emerging trends, there are three that pop into mind immediately. One of them being hyper-personalization, the second being predictive analytics, and the third one, I guess, would be chatbots, virtual assistants. When it comes to the hyper-personalization, we're at a stage now where we can take customer data and we can shift campaigns or content on the fly to deliver relevant content to audiences based on the data that we have about these audiences. And when it comes to predictive analytics, I guess also training our models on the data that we know about our audiences, about their behaviors, we can then mold the content that's going to them in a fashion that we know, or we can now predict what their next behavioral move is going to be. So in that space, I see there is an emerging trend there, and we can make a lot of use of that from a business function. When it comes to the chatbots or the virtual assistants, they really can help a lot of businesses solve a lot of customer service issues. You know, this chatbot can take care of a vast amount of inquiries or inbound questions. They can handle the mundane tasks, while you can leave the detailed, complex items for customer service representatives that can then enhance customer satisfaction. So for me, I think those three areas, trends that are up and rising.
I think it's a great topic that you brought that up. So personalization, hyper-personalization is a huge, I think, way of using AI as well. But do you think like the brands are ready? Are their databases ready? Are they really using it or understand the benefit of it? So, I mean, a question to all three of you, basically.
Yeah, I do believe that they are using it. I mean, AI is not new. Right, so, okay, generative AI, that's kind of the hype right now on ChatGPT and what we're talking about. But AI has been around for a very long time, you know, in machine learning, predictive text when you're typing, you know, the playlists that you get on Netflix. I mean, this is all AI-based. So we've been using AI for a very long time. And when it comes to the advertising or the marketing space, yes, it does play a very important role. We had planners that would sit and plan media plans over weeks or months in some instances, depending on how big the campaign or the client brief is. And today we can take those briefs, put them in an AI platform based on historical data, based on audience insights. We can then create strategies, segment audiences, target people more precisely, and deliver messages that resonate and enhance engagement, because those messages are relevant to audiences. They are being delivered when they want to be consumed by those audiences, with content that resonates with those people. And yes, for us, at least at Publicis Group, we've been using AI for a very long time. We have our Marcel platform that was launched over a decade ago, that we've been using internally, and we're slowly progressing in this space, adding more and more tools.
I think leading agencies like Publicis, right, you have the technology, you have the team in place, but I think the in-house marketing teams are still struggling with it. And looking at it from purely kind of technology perspective, to use even machine learning, right, you need clean data, and that data needs to be contextualized, right? And if you look at many companies, they still struggle with data being in many different silos, many different systems, lacking relationships between the data, and that's the prerequisite, right? So you really need to invest in having the right technology stack from the infrastructure perspective, the infrastructure needs to be scalable, right? As you work with bigger and bigger amounts of data. To the platform perspective, how do you build relationships between the siloed data you have? And I think agencies figured it out quite a while ago. In-house teams still working on it.
I mean, to add to that and build on it a little bit, there are really three pillars to any successful machine intelligence product. Is the data part, the compute part, and then the application part. I think that there's like a general misunderstanding of what we mean when we talk about data and data being cleansed or data being clean, because the historical version of it is sort of like your web analytics data or your marketing data. When we're looking at developing a machine intelligent application, and when we talk about data, what we're really talking about is the annotation of that data. So there's this sort of process where, you know, we talk about training a machine. So I might have, you know, a glass, and then I'll go and give it to something like the Mechanical Turk, for example, or some other data labeling solution or data annotation solution, and it will send out to 50,000 people and ask 50,000 people to write, what is this thing? Then it will show the picture to the computer, and the computer will read from the Excel and say, oh, this is, or whatever, Python, PHP, whatever. It will read from that and say, I've now learned that this is a glass. And when we talk about data and machine learning and machine intelligence, it feels to me like that sort of learning process and that data annotation process hasn't really been communicated to the stakeholders. So I would say there's a lot of upskilling that's required at a senior level, so that instead of looking at the data and saying, oh, well, I didn't get sales or I did get sales, really we're looking at it from what is the purpose and the function of the data that needs to be cleaned. Then you can start looking at your infrastructure and your scalability of it.
So thank you very much. I think it was quite interesting, especially I like the abbreviation, like data computing and application. So I think it's a good thought to keep in mind. But another question, I mean, using AI eases a lot, but then at some point you might not have any control over it. So where does the brand reputation falls under that? Like, if you were to actually give everything to AI, create all your campaigns on it, let the machine learn, how do you overcome the biases? How do you actually make sure the brand reputation is there? So anyone who want to start about that?
I'll start with a very simple one. They're the techies, so they'll give you a detailed answer. For me, it's quite simple. Keep the human in the loop. We're not going to exclude the humans. So long as there are humans making sure that the output of the machine is verified, they are keeping it clean, they are making sure that there are no biases, that the output that's coming out of any AI platform is being utilized. There is at the end of it, or at some point, a human in that loop. For me, that is a very important part of ensuring that these things don't just take over the world and, you know, run loose on their own. I've simplified it a lot, but they'll give you the techie answer.
Yeah, I don't think they're that smart to run loose on their own. You can control it. You just need to read the fine print, right? So one is kind of different tools you access and the way you use it, the parameters you instill controls what happens with the data, right? There's even a way to use, let's take ChatGPT in the private environment, right? Where the input or the output is not exposed to the algorithm as a basis, as a wide basis. The second thing is education, right? Like at the end of the day, it's people triggering these prompts. They need to understand how to use it in a safe manner. And then I say safe, meaning not disclosing confidential data, putting parameters that take into account sometimes bias or whatever it is. So it's not as maybe mystical as many people think, but there's a lot of fine print there you need to read to really understand how these tools work and where the risks lie.
I completely disagree. So look, I see two parts to the question, one around bias. And I think there are significant issues with the bias conversation. So at the moment, the way that we train these LLMs or these large language models is by using a process called reinforcement learning with human feedback. The challenge with bias and the reason that this bias comes out is because fundamentally, if I take a group of the same people, ask them a similar question, they're going to give similar answers. The way that reinforcement learning with human feedback works is you've got, let's say we've asked the AI a question, we've asked the language model a question, it's given a series of different answers. We've then sent that out to 50,000 people and asked them which is the best answer. Now, depending on my upbringing, depending on my value system, depending on my culture, I'm going to have a different opinion on that to say yourself. I mean, just from a gender perspective, right? I don't know what it is to live life as a woman. I only know what it is to live life as a man. So my answer for when I walk home at night, do I feel fear, is going to be different to your answer potentially. Do I mind walking where there are no streetlights? I absolutely have no problem. So the bias is really in the way that we're training the machine, and by that I mean in how we're annotating the data. The second question, or the second part of the question as far as I see it, is around alignment. So there's a guy called Max Tegmark. He had this thought experiment, which was the paperclip maximizer. It was either Max Tegmark or Nick Bostrom, I forget exactly who, came up with this thought experiment, which was the paperclip maximizer, right? So in this idea, in this thought experiment, he said, I'm going to tell the machine that I want to create paperclips. Make as many paperclips as you can. And then when he extrapolates that forwards, the machine inadvertently, because it's not aligned with the human values and the human condition, goes and takes over the universe and turns planets into paperclips, because in its mind, it's maximizing the paperclip equation. So we have a fundamental issue with alignment of machines to understand what it is when we say make my paperclip manufacturing process more efficient, that there is a limit to that. And I think that's sort of where I disagree. They are black boxes at the moment. There's some work, really interesting work that happened last week, that was published last week by a company called Anthropic, I mentioned them earlier, where they started to dissect what's going on inside of these machine learning models. Is the first proper work that's been able to look inside of it. And it's still only looking at sort of 10% of it. The way that the machines are working is effectively trying to mirror what we know about our own neuroscience and how our own brains work. But we don't understand anything about how our brains work. All that we know is there's a bunch of neurons and they fire, but we don't understand how it accesses a memory, for example. So I think there is a lot of mysticism around how these models work.
So I agree there is mysticism, but I don't want, the way we use it for marketing is still extremely basic. It's extremely basic, right? So the way models work, there is mysticism. The way technology works, absolutely. But I think it's very important not to kind of take the approach where we're so scared about the way it might work that it prevents us to use it towards very simple use cases, because we're just we're just exploring, right? And probably the most common use in marketing is content generation, right? And one of the biggest risks with that is actually leaking confidential company data. Then you put it on the, whatever conversational bot. So yes, there are unknowns, but our use cases are still so basic, and as long as we have the good internal governance within the companies as well, of checking the output, checking the input, setting parameters of what can be fed as a prompt, I think we're still on the safe side for machines taking over the world.
And if they did, we can just walk home with Harvey. So...
Outlier. Okay, so I'm going to move into the more of a loyalty side of things. Let's assume we have the greatest personalization with AI. Let's assume the brand reputation is there. Let's assume there's no bias. So, and you said content creation is probably one of the most important pieces that we use AI for. How do you make it in a loyalty program sounds more human, realistic, and effective? And do you have any best use cases you want to share with us?
Yeah, so there's an example that a financial services customer used where they were using a chatbot, or have been using a chatbot, continue to use a chatbot, as their main CX agent. Inside of that, it's doing various things. So it's trying to understand the personality and the linguistic profile of the person that they're talking with. It's trying to understand at the same time the sentiment of what that person, of how that person is speaking. And its objective, the objective of the agent is to move someone from dissatisfied to satisfied. And it's using a lot of tone of voice analysis so as that when the customer is speaking back to it, it can monitor and understand the change in the person's attitude towards it. What it's trying to do while it's doing that, through this linguistic profiling, is mirror the language profile of the person that's speaking to it. So if I typically use a group of words more frequently, it will try to curry favor with me and make it feel more personal to me by echoing and mirroring the same linguistic profile as I use. And that's been a really interesting thing to watch unfold.
I think some of the use cases I've seen emerging is in retail, which is very similar to what Harvey is describing as well, because then it goes back to building the relationship with the brand, right? It's building that emotional connection, whether it's something you relate to or aspire to be, right? And the interesting use cases that are emerging are the ones that are using voice as an input, because the models are becoming quite good at reading a sentiment from the voice and the verbiage you're choosing, and personalizing the response, especially if you talk to a retailer in terms of shopping, personalizing the response based off the tone, the word usage, trying to guess your mood, and serving you very personalized content and suggestions based on that.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit early in the loyalty stage of things when it comes to AI. And we're talking about linguistic models and we're talking about interaction, but at best they're chatbots as they exist. So I guess we're looking more for taking care of the mundane tasks. Those chatbots can, interact with the customer. They can ensure customer satisfaction when the customer knows exactly what they want and can talk and engage with that chatbot based on the scripts and the learnings and the algorithms that it has and the data it has back end. But loyalty is something much deeper, and I think that we're still very green in that space, especially when it comes to AI. There's still a long way to go.
Yeah, so I totally agree. I think loyalty needs a bit more of a emphasis, at least for now, deeper understanding. So then I want to ask, what do you see the future AI is going to be, especially in the marketing industry? And also, keep in mind, what do you think the regulations are going to be, how they are interacting at the moment, especially with privacy regulations? So what do you feel about that, see about that?
So I think I can comment maybe from the privacy regulations and data side, not necessarily the model side, right? So here in the kingdom, you have PLPS, and then you have quite strict data sovereignty and residency regulations that come from NCA and CSD, right? And it's something all the companies that want to use these tools, especially at the platform and application SaaS layer, need to be aware of, right? Because what that means is that each country, and you have GDPR in Europe, which is somewhat equivalent, right? Each country is starting to care where the data is stored and where the data is processed, right? Most of these tools we're talking about, especially when it comes to generative AI, they are primarily available on the hyperscalers, right? So Google Cloud, AWS, Azure. You need to be aware whether the region you're using is actually storing and processing data there or somewhere else, because sometimes if the data is actually, if you send your customer data, which is a personal data with some personal information, is stored and processed somewhere else, it is a violation of some of the regulations, right? So this is, again, a function that's important to have internally, understanding how to use these tools in a compliant way. Because still the regulations are new, they're changing, but the trend, at least in the region and in the kingdom, they will be strictly enforced. So it's better to be ahead of it and really understanding what you're doing there.
I see you've got sort of a short term, a mid term, and a long term. Short term, it will be continue to be used for the sort of basic stuff it's already being used for. A bit of generative stuff, a little bit of predictive modeling. Mid-term, I think it starts to replace a lot of jobs. Long-term, I think there are two outcomes. Either the end of the world or utopia, right? There's this really interesting conversation about, you've got two sides of the coin, right? What happens if it all goes wrong and we all get enslaved by the machines and it's Terminator? Or what happens if it all goes right? And I no longer have to study mathematics to be good at maths. I can just download a thing and then my brain can just assimilate it and now I know everything. I never need to go to the gym because there's just a way of keeping fit. I never have to try hard to do anything. What does that mean for us? What does that make us
Heaven.
if we no longer but if we no longer have to try to do anything? Our brains are wired in a way where we don't want to do difficult things, but when we complete a difficult thing, we get an enormous sense of satisfaction from it. So what does it mean to us in the long term if it goes right? And I don't think enough people really think about that question.
Shadi, anything to add?
Yeah, I think they've summed it up there. For me, I mean, where it's headed and where it's going, I'm quite humbled, to tell you the truth. I mean, we're living in times when we're trying to build something that is going to hopefully do things for us faster. It's going to do things for us more accurately and help us do things that we've never done before. And as humans, we are building, if you would, this God mode AI type machine. And we're at a stage where governance is so important, as you know, for our survival, so that we don't end up with Harvey's doomsday, scenario. But at the same time, when we govern it, we want to govern it so that when it does output and we do get to that utopic state, there is still a place left for humanity and for humanity to thrive. And I think the creativity, our output, the governance that we put in right now, we're going to a really wonderful place, and it's really exciting, and it's quite humbling for me. Where I see today, and if we're looking at mid-term, short-term things, there are things that AI is good at and things that AI is not really good at. And there's a short acronym that I've kind of developed where I know it keeps me in check when I see if I'm going to make a decision on what I'm going to utilize or what I'm going to get the teams to utilize AI for. And you've heard the term gamify, so I've put a small twist on that and I've called it gatify. So when it comes to things like generative AI, AI is good in that. When it comes to analyzing, AI can also help with that. When it comes to thinking or ideation, AI can help you with that. When it comes to research or fetching data, AI is also great at that. And then when it comes to interaction, so Gatify, I think for me, kind of sums up the midterm where we're going, and we should be looking at trying to incorporate the AI into as many of the lower level tasks as possible that we can, which will help us then build on top of that the next layer and the next layer and the next.
Perfect. Thank you so much for all of you. So we have time for just one question from the stage, from the audience, if you have any. Okay.
Hi, I'm Mikhail from Mindshare. So my question is, this is something with what we struggle with social media as well. So for example, if I have a certain search intent and I look for certain content, I'll be stuck in a search bubble. So how can we reduce or eliminate that when it comes to AI? You discussed that we can have personalized AI chatbots, we can have personalized machines that we can talk to day to day. So how can we avoid that search bubble? Let's say if I'm having a certain conversation with this chatbot day to day, I won't be able to see the other side of things. I will be stuck in those things with what I actually feed to the bot, and I would get the answer that I want to hear from the bot. So how can we avoid that? Secondly, how can we avoid misinformation when it comes to AI? Thank you.
Hello. Hello? Yeah. So with the first one, For me, it comes down to the alignment problem again. So when the models are being designed and created, how are we building in a sort of rationale for it so as that it knows to project or present two sides of an argument? At the moment, it would be fair to say that there is a somewhat leftward-leaning, I'm looking at you, Tony, there is a somewhat leftward-leaning bias in the bots and in the large language models, which has been acknowledged. So yeah, I think it's really, unfortunately, and I don't want to abdicate responsibility for it, but you got two routes. Either you as the user ask the opposite side of the question to get the opposite side of the answer, or we build something in which has to happen at the developer level, where it looks for offering alternative points of view. And there is some work that's being done on that. Wikipedia are very big into offering their data to the large language models so as that they can be accurately represented from both sides of an argument with citations as well.
Yeah, I think to the second part of your question about misinformation, right? There's two sides there. Obviously, checking the sources of the data, right? So if you prompt a question, you can actually provide me the sources that generated these answers. But then it comes to kind of pure marketing use, right? And if you want to create a chatbot for your customers to respond about the queries, about the services, products you provide, there is a way to train these LLMs only on your data, right? And then again, it goes back to what we started this panel with. You need to have processes in place to make sure that the data you have is clean, accurate, contextualized, right? So that data governance and data cleaning is extremely important.
Yeah, great question. And I think for me, the answer lies in what the use case is specifically. You cannot just create a chatbot AI generalized use case that can be used for absolutely everything out there. As I said at the start of the conversation, the human in the loop is very important. And when we are using, let's say, the chatbot AIs in an e-commerce sense, so that AI is going to take care of the mundane tasks. So if we're buying shoes online from a shoe retailer, you'd be having a conversation with that bot and saying things like, what shoe sizes are available in the inventory? What colors do you have? What are the new models? So those types of questions the AI can handle quite easily, and they can take care of that when historically somebody would have to answer that on the phone. You'd need to go into a retailer, talk to a human, and we could free up those humans to interact with the human that's talking to the chatbot once we get to a point where we're about to convert, or if the AI reaches a stumbling box, there can be a flag so long as you keep the human in the loop. So don't just give all of the responsibility to the AI. So going back to what Idris said, that there is some onus on you as a brand when you're creating this in terms of the data you feed it and what you set it up to do. But don't create a false pretense for your clients either in that, hey, our AI will solve everything for you, just come talk to our bot. No, I think at some point the bot needs to hand over to the human to continue the full circle or the entire journey. And that way we can protect from the biases, from the hallucinations, and from receiving the incorrect information that you're trying to retrieve as a consumer talking to this chatbot.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this wonderful panel, all the insights. So thank you to